The galaxy knew Queen Sarathis as one of the most powerful rulers in the stars. Her name alone could silence entire battlefields. She had crushed rebellions, conquered 12 worlds, and forged the mighty Xylar dominion through sheer will and blood. Every scar on her skin was a story of victory. Every enemy she faced had learned to fear the blazing fire in her eyes. But behind that strength, hidden deep within her grand palace, there was one secret that haunted her. Her only daughter. Princess Lyra was everything her mother was not. Where the queen was fierce, Lyra was gentle. Where Sarathis commanded armies, Lyra preferred silence and peace. She did not like weapons or war drills. Instead, she spent her days painting the gardens, helping servants, or caring for the wounded animals that wandered into the royal courtyard. To the queen, it was shameful. To have a daughter so soft-hearted in a world built by strength, it felt like a curse. The court whispered behind the queen's back. The great Sarathis, conqueror of worlds, has a daughter who can't even lift a blade. Those words stung deeper than any enemy's strike. The queen tried to change her. She sent Lyra to the war academies, forced her to train with soldiers, made her watch battles from command decks. But no matter how much she pushed, Lyra always hesitated when it came to hurting others. She could never see glory in bloodshed. One night, after a failed training session, the queen lost her patience. She threw down her golden scepter and shouted, "You shame me, Lyra! You are not fit to rule after me. You are not a warrior, you are weak." Lyra stood there, trembling, her eyes full of tears. But she did not argue. She simply bowed her head and whispered, "Maybe I'm not meant to rule through fear, Mother. Maybe there is another way." Those words only angered the queen more. She turned away, cold and silent. From that day, she stopped calling her daughter to council meetings. Lyra became a shadow in her own home, unseen, unheard, unwanted. Years passed. The queen grew busier with wars and politics, while Lyra lived quietly among the gardens and healers. But one day, something unexpected happened. Humans, a small, bold species from a distant blue planet, arrived in the Xylar Dominion. The humans were unlike any race the queen had ever known. They were fragile compared to Xylar warriors, yet they refused to bow. They spoke with confidence, their eyes full of strange hope. The queen saw potential, not in their strength but in their cleverness. They built machines faster than most races, and they fought with courage far greater than their size suggested. An alliance was proposed between the Xylar Dominion and the Human Federation. The humans requested peace and trade. The queen wanted something stronger, loyalty. And so, to seal the alliance, she decided on an ancient custom, a royal marriage. Her advisors looked at her in surprise. "Your Majesty, who will marry into the human race?" The queen's gaze turned toward the quiet figure standing by the balcony, her daughter, Lyra. For a moment, Sarathis hesitated. But then a cold idea crossed her mind. This was perfect. She could rid herself of her daughter's weakness and still gain an alliance. It was like killing two birds with one stone. "Let the human choose her," she said finally. "Let him take her away from my sight." The chosen human was a man named Elias Carter, a former soldier, now an engineer. He was strong by human standards, yet calm and humble. When he first met the princess, he bowed awkwardly, unsure how to act before alien royalty. Lyra, nervous but polite, offered him a soft smile. It was the first time someone had looked at her not with judgment, but with quiet curiosity. The queen watched their meeting from afar, her expression unreadable. To her, this union was nothing more than strategy, a way to strengthen her empire and dispose of a burden. But she did not know that this simple, unwanted marriage would one day change the fate of empires, and that the very human she dismissed as lesser would teach her what true strength really meant. The palace of Xylar was built of black crystal and gold, shining like a crown above the clouds. Yet inside those grand halls, Princess Lyra felt small and lost. After the royal wedding, her life changed completely. She was no longer just the queen's daughter. She was now the wife of a human, the people whispered behind her back. "The princess has been given to a fragile creature," they said. "The queen must have wanted to get rid of her." Lyra heard those words every day, and though they hurt deeply, she stayed silent. Her new husband, Elias Carter, was nothing like the warrior she had grown up around. He was calm, patient, and spoke with quiet confidence. He didn't wear armor or carry weapons. Instead, he wore a simple uniform and always had tools hanging from his belt. He worked with machines, not swords, At first, Lyra didn't know how to speak to him. Their worlds were too different. She had been raised among conquerors. He had been raised among dreamers. When they dined together, she would sit stiffly, unsure of what to say. But Elias never rushed her. He would talk softly about his home, the blue skies of Earth, the sound of rain, the smell of forests after storms. Sometimes she would just listen, closing her eyes and imagining that faraway world. His words painted pictures in her mind more beautiful than any battle song. One evening, when he noticed her looking at the stars through the balcony, he walked beside her and said, "You have a kind soul. Lyra, you see beauty in things most people ignore." She turned to him surprised. No one had ever said something like that to her before. "My mother thinks it's weakness," she said quietly. Elias smiled gently. "Then your mother doesn't understand strength." Those words stayed with her. Days turned into weeks. Elias spent most of his time helping Xylar engineers fix old ships and improve the city's energy systems. Wherever he went, he treated everyone with respect, even the lowest servants. Many aliens laughed at him for it. Humans are strange, they said. They act as if kindness can build empires. But soon people began to notice something. Machines that had been broken for years started working again. Workers began smiling when he entered the room. And Lyra, who once walked through the palace with her head lowered, began walking beside him, her shoulders a little straighter each day. She watched him repair a power engine one afternoon. His hands were dirty, his clothes covered in dust, yet he looked more at peace than any general in armor. "You work so hard," she said softly. He chuckled. "Back home we say if something's broken, you don't throw it away. You fix it." Lyra smiled faintly. "Even people?" Elias looked at her for a long moment. "Especially people." It was a simple answer, but it touched something deep inside her heart. That night, she dreamed of a world where no one was forced to fight, where people like Elias and her could live without fear or judgment. For the first time she felt hope, fragile but real. Meanwhile, the queen watched them from afar. She had expected her daughter to fade into insignificance, living quietly with her human husband. But instead, something strange was happening. The princess who once trembled before soldiers was now speaking confidently, walking with purpose. The softness in her eyes had not disappeared, and it had become her strength. The queen did not like it. "This human has changed her," she said one evening to her advisors. "He fills her head with foolish ideas of peace and kindness. She was meant to learn obedience, not rebellion." Her advisor bowed his head. "Should we separate them, my queen?" Sarathis stared out at the city lights. "No," she said after a long pause. "Let her play her little dream. The real galaxy will crush her soon enough." But fate had other plans. In the months that followed, rumors began to spread, dark rumors of a coming war. A new empire was rising beyond the borders, one that would soon challenge every world, even Xylar itself. And when that time came, it would not be the Queen's armies that stood between destruction and survival. It would be the quiet human and the gentle princess who loved him, approx. 650 words, third-person, simple, emotional English. Peace never lasts long among the stars. For a few short years, the Xylar Dominion and the Human Federation lived side by side, sharing trade, knowledge, and culture. The people called it the Golden Calm, a rare time without bloodshed. But deep beyond the border systems, a shadow was growing. The Koth Empire, a brutal race of conquerors, had returned. They were known for their cruelty. Worlds burned, cities turned to ash, and entire species enslaved. They were ancient enemies of the Xylar, and now their ships filled the dark skies once again. When the first colonies fell, the Queen's war halls blazed with light. Generals shouted, fleets were prepared, and the Queen stood at the center, her armor shining like fire. "We will crush them," she declared. "The Koth have forgotten who rules this galaxy." But far from the palace, in a peaceful human settlement on a moon called Varan, Elias Carter and Princess Lyra lived quietly. Elias worked as chief engineer for the outpost, while Lyra helped run a small medical center for wounded travelers. They had built a simple life, one filled with laughter, warmth, and small joys that made the universe seem gentle, until the war came knocking. Lyra heard the first alarms one morning. The skies above Varan turned red as distress beacons flashed. Reports came through. The Koth fleet was moving toward their system. Their goal was to destroy human and Xylar colonies to break the alliance. The Queen sent a message to all border worlds. Evacuate the civilians. The royal fleets will handle this. Lyra read the message with fear. She knew what handle this meant. Millions woe. I'll die while the Queen protected her main worlds. Elias stood beside her, calm but serious. We can't wait for them, he said. We need to fight back. Lyra's eyes widened. Elias, we don't have an army. These are farmers, traders. Then we'll make one, he said quietly. We'll do what humans always do. We'll survive. That night, Elias called the settlers together. Humans, Xylar civilians, and even a few alien refugees gathered under the moonlight. He spoke to them not as a soldier, but as a man who refused to give up. I know we don't have fleets, he said, his voice steady. I know we're outnumbered, but I also know something the Koth will never understand. They fight for power. We fight for home. His words spread like fire. Mechanics, farmers, and miners all volunteered to help. Elias turned scrap ships into fighters, cargo drones into defense turrets, and mining lasers into weapons. Even Lyra helped, healing the wounded and keeping morale alive. When word reached the Queen that her daughter and a human were preparing to fight on their own, she was furious. They'll only get themselves killed, she roared. Pull them back! But her order came too late. The Koth fleet had already arrived. Their ships were massive, covered in black armor, glowing red like beasts from nightmares. They entered the system firing without warning. The ground shook as explosions filled the sky. Elias stood in the control tower, giving orders to every pilot and defense team. Focus fire on their engines. Don't waste your shots. Protect the evac ships first. Lyra watched him move, calm, brave, and focused. He was no longer the quiet engineer she had married. He was a leader. Hours passed like days. The small defense force fought with everything they had. Every time a ship fell, Elias ordered another to cover the gap. When systems broke, he ran to fix them himself. When fear spread, he stood tall and said, Hold the line. Even the Xylar soldiers, once doubtful of the human, followed him with respect. As the sun rose over the burning horizon, the battle still raged. The settlers' fleet was nearly destroyed, but they had bought precious time. Evacuation ships were leaving safely. Then came a message from the Koth flagship, a deep, cruel voice echoing through the comms. Your little rebellion ends now, human. Elias looked at the screen, his face pale but fearless. Maybe, he said softly. But not today. He turned to Lyra and smiled faintly. Get to the shuttle. I'll hold them off. Lyra shook her head, tears filling her eyes. No, Elias. Please. But before she could finish, the enemy ships began to descend. The human who had once fixed broken machines now prepared to face an entire empire. Alone, if he had to. And in that moment, Lyra finally understood what her mother never could. That strength wasn't about power or destruction. It was about the courage to protect others, even when you know you might fall. The Battle of Varen burned across the sky like a storm made of fire. The Koth fleet was endless, their warships larger than mountains, their weapons powerful enough to tear through entire cities. Yet still, Elias and his small force refused to surrender. Every second they fought was a miracle. Every minute they survived was a victory. But deep down, everyone knew they were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. In the control tower, Elias stood over the holographic map, sweat dripping down his face. His eyes were sharp, focused, calm. The kind of calm that comes only when a person has accepted death. Around him, alarms blared and officers shouted updates. Sector 4 is gone. We lost half our ships. Elias gritted his teeth. Pull back the survivors. Route power to the shields. No one dies for nothing. Lyra was beside him, refusing to leave his side. Her hands were trembling as she worked the medical console, sending drones to rescue the wounded. The light of explosions reflected in her tear-filled eyes. She had never seen so much death, but she refused to give in to fear. Outside, the human ships fought like wolves surrounded by giants. They weaved through the debris, using asteroids as cover, firing from impossible angles. Elias had trained them well. Every pilot knew the plan: protect the evacuation ships no matter what. Hours passed. One by one, the defense ships fell. The sky became a graveyard of fire and metal. Still, Elias fought. When a power relay exploded, he ran down himself to fix it. When a pilot panicked, he spoke to them through the radio, steady and gentle. Breathe, he would say. We fight for each other. That's all that matters. Lyra watched him and felt her heart breaking and swelling at the same time. He wasn't just brave, he was kind even in the middle of hell, and that kindness gave everyone strength. But then the Koth flagship entered the battlefield. It was enormous, and a ship so big it blocked out the stars. From its belly, a weapon charged with red energy, glowing brighter and brighter. Elias looked at the radar and knew what it was. A planet breaker. If it fired, the entire colony, every remaining soul, would be erased. He turned to Lyra. We have one chance. If I can disable that weapon, we can save the evac ships. Lyra grabbed his arm, fear in her voice. You can't go there. It's suicide. He smiled sadly. Everything I've done, Lyra, everything I am, it's for people like you. You taught me that even small lives matter. I can't stop now. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Then let me come with you. He shook his head. No, you need to live. Promise me that. She couldn't speak. She only nodded, her throat too tight to say goodbye. Elias left in a small fighter ship, its engines glowing faint blue. From the command tower, Lyra watched it soar into the chaos. He flew straight through enemy fire, dodging blasts and wreckage, heading directly toward the Koth flagship. His voice came through the comms, calm and steady. This is Elias Carter. To everyone still fighting, hold the line a little longer. He dove into the flagship's hangar, crashing through the shields and landing amid enemy troops. Alone, he ran through the metallic corridors, shooting and throwing grenades. He planted explosives near the weapon's power core. His breath heavy, his hands trembling. Outside, the Queen's fleet finally arrived, too late to join the fight, but just in time to see a single human ship vanish into the light. The explosion was like a sun being born. The Koth flagship split apart, fire bursting from its core. The shockwave sent debris scattering across space, but it also disabled the remaining enemy ships. The evacuation ships escaped. Lyra fell to her knees, watching the blast fade. Her hands covered her mouth, her heart shattered into pieces. She whispered his name again and again, but only silence answered. When the Queen's forces landed on Varen, they found the princess among the ruins, her eyes empty, yet burning with a strange light. She had lost everything, her love, her peace, but inside her heart something powerful had awakened. The Queen expected her daughter to cry and break, but when Lyra rose to her feet, she looked stronger than any warrior. She stared into the sky, toward the fading fire of the human ship, and whispered, I will not let his sacrifice be forgotten. And in that moment, the useless princess of Xylar became something more, the flame that would carry his memory through the stars. The smoke of battle still hung heavy over the planet Varen. Ash drifted across the sky like gray snow. The ground was broken, scattered with the remains of ship, human and alien alike. What had once been a thriving colony was now silent, filled only with the distant sound of burning metal and the whispers of the wind. Among the wreckage walked Princess Lyra, her body covered in dust, her eyes red from tears. Every step she took was heavy, but she kept moving. She searched through the ruins with shaking hands, calling out again and again, Elias, Elias, where are you? Her voice echoed through the emptiness, but no one answered. The battle was over, and the Koth fleet had been destroyed, but at a terrible cost. Elias's ship, the one that had flown into the enemy flagship, was gone. She stumbled over pieces of shattered metal, her heart refusing to believe what her eyes saw. The ground was still warm from the explosion, and the air smelled of smoke and iron. Then, through the haze, she saw something, a broken piece of armor with a familiar human symbol burned into it. Her breath caught. She ran toward it. Under the debris, half buried in ash and steel, lay Elias Carter. His breathing was weak, his uniform torn, his hands burned. Yet when he opened his eyes and saw her face, he smiled faintly. You came, he whispered, his voice soft but steady. Lyra fell to her knees beside him, tears running down her face. Of course I came. You said we'd fix this world together. Remember? He tried to laugh, but it came out as a weak breath. I remember, he said. Seems like I broke it again. Don't talk like that, she said quickly, pressing her hands against his wounds. The healers are coming. You'll be fine, Elias, you have to be fine. But deep in her heart she knew he wouldn't make it. His body was too damaged, his pulse too faint. Still she refused to let go. Elias looked at her, his eyes calm. The same eyes that had once looked at broken machines and found ways to repair them. Listen to me, Lyra, he said slowly. You can still fix this world. Not with weapons, but with hope. She shook her head, crying harder. I can't do it without you. Yes, you can, he said, his hand trembling as he touched her cheek. Because you already did. You made people believe again. You showed them what kindness can do. That's more powerful than any army. Lyra clutched his hand tightly, her heart breaking with every word. Please, don't leave me. He smiled weakly. I'm not leaving. I'll be here. In everything you build. Then his hand fell still. The fire of life, His eyes faded. For a long time, Lyra couldn't move. She sat there in silence, her tears falling onto his cold face. Around her, the sun began to rise, its golden light cutting through the smoke. It was the first sunrise after the war. Quiet, warm, and unbearably beautiful. When the Queen's flagship finally descended upon Varen, Queen Sarathis herself stepped onto the ruined ground. She found her daughter there, kneeling beside the human's body. For a moment, the mighty Queen said nothing. The sight struck something deep within her, something she hadn't felt in years. Grief. Her daughter's hair was tangled, her clothes torn, but her eyes, they were filled with strength, not despair. Lyra stood slowly and looked at her mother. He saved us all, she said quietly. And you never believed in him. The Queen opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time in her life, she had no answer. Lyra turned away and began walking toward the survivors. Her movements were calm, purposeful. People looked to her, the soldiers, the civilians, even the wounded. They followed her as if she were already their leader. In that moment, Queen Sarathis realized something painful. The daughter she had once called weak was now stronger than any warrior she had ever known. And the human she had once dismissed as useless had changed not only her daughter, but the destiny of their entire race. The Queen looked up at the sky where the light of the explosion still shimmered faintly, and for the first time in her long reign she whispered a prayer, not to her gods, but to the memory of a human who had shown her people what true courage meant. The war was over, but peace did not come easily. The once beautiful colony of Varen lay in ruins, a reminder of the price they had paid. But from that ruin, something new began to grow. It started with Princess Lyra. She no longer hid in the shadows or avoided responsibility. The shy, quiet daughter who once trembled before her mother's gaze had vanished. In her place stood a woman of strength, calm and unshakable. Her voice was soft, yet when she spoke, even hardened soldiers listened. Every morning she walked through the camps where survivors rested. She helped carry supplies, tended to the wounded, and comforted the children who cried for parents that never came back. The soldiers, human and Xylar alike, began to call her the Star of Varen because wherever she went, hope followed. Her mother, Queen Sarathis, watched from her command ship. She had expected her daughter to break under grief, to collapse after losing her human husband. Instead, Lyra shone brighter than ever, and that brightness made the Queen feel something strange, a mix of pride and shame. The Queen had spent her whole life believing that strength came from power, control, and fear. But here was her daughter proving her wrong with every act of kindness. When the rebuilding began, Lyra refused to let others do the work alone. She joined them in the dust, her royal robes stained with ash. She worked beside human engineers and Xylar soldiers, speaking to both in equal tone. When someone fell sick, she was the first to bring medicine. When someone argued, she listened and found peace between them. One evening, after a long day of work, she stood on the balcony overlooking the city ruins. The stars glimmered above, and the same stars she had once looked at with Elias. She whispered softly, "You were right, my love. We can fix this." Below, workers were rebuilding what was destroyed, and among them stood a statue made of stone and steel, a simple figure of a man with his hand raised toward the sky. At the base, words were carved in both human and Xylar script. Elias Carter, the human who taught us strength. When the Queen arrived on Varen a month later, she walked through that garden in silence. She saw how humans and Xylar worked side by side, laughing, sharing meals, and rebuilding together. It was something she had never thought possible. Two races, once divided by pride, now united by sacrifice. She met her daughter in the center of the garden. Lyra stood in front of the statue, her hair tied back, her face calm. She looked older now, not in years, but in spirit. "You have done much," the Queen said slowly. "More than I expected." Lyra turned to her. "I only did what needed to be done." The people needed hope, not orders. Sarathis frowned slightly. And you think hope can protect an empire? Lyra's gaze was steady. It already has. Elias protected it with his life. Now it's my turn to protect it with my heart. The queen said nothing for a while. She looked at the statue again, her expression softening. I never understood that man, she admitted quietly. He had no power, no army, no throne. Yet everyone followed him. Lyra smiled faintly. Because he saw the value in people, not just in victory. For the first time in many years, the queen felt the weight of her choices. She remembered how she had mocked her daughter, how she had called her weak. Now that same daughter stood before her as a leader who had won hearts, not through fear but through love. As the sun set, painting the sky gold and red, the queen placed her hand on the statue's base. Perhaps, she said softly, we have been wrong about humans. Lyra looked up at the stars. Not just about humans, Mother. About what it truly means to be strong. For the first time, the queen saw her daughter not as a burden or a failure, but as the future her empire desperately needed. The realization filled her chest with both pride and deep regret. And as night fell on Varen, the queen understood that the legacy of one human man now lived in every corner of her world. In the people who rebuilt, in the peace that followed, and in the daughter she had once called useless. Years passed. The world of Varen healed slowly, but its scars never fully vanished. Cities were rebuilt, alliances formed, and both humans and Xylar began to live side by side.
Yet even as peace settled like morning dew,
Queen Sarathis felt an emptiness inside her heart, a hollow place where guilt quietly lived. Every night she found herself standing before the great window of her palace, staring at the stars. Once she had looked at them with pride, thinking her empire was endless, her will unbreakable. Now she only saw memories, her daughter's soft laughter, the human's kind eyes, the sound of his voice as he had faced death without fear. Elias Carter. The name that once annoyed her now haunted her. She had once called him the useless human. She had thought marrying him to her daughter would remove a burden. But now she realized he had been the greatest gift her world ever received. One evening, as crimson light filled the sky, a messenger arrived. Your Majesty, he said softly, bowing his head, Princess Lyra requests your presence. It's the anniversary of Commander Elias's sacrifice. The queen's heart tightened. She nodded silently and followed. The memorial stood in the heart of the capital, a garden of white trees and silver stone. In the center was the same statue of Elias, now surrounded by glowing flowers that shimmered softly in the dusk. Hundreds of people gathered there, humans and Xylar together, lighting small orbs of blue light in remembrance. Lyra stood before the statue, wearing a simple robe instead of royal armor. Her hair was tied back, her face calm yet filled with quiet sorrow. When she saw her mother, she smiled faintly and gestured for her to stand beside her. The queen hesitated. For a moment she felt like an outsider, not the ruler of a galaxy, but a mother who had made too many mistakes. Lyra began to speak, her voice carrying through the garden. He was just one man, she said. But he taught us what no army could: compassion, courage, and unity. He didn't need a crown to change the stars. He only needed a heart that refused to hate. People lowered their heads, some wiping away tears. The queen listened, her chest heavy with emotion. When the speech ended, Lyra turned to her mother. Would you like to say something, Mother? Sarathis froze. For the first time in her long life, words did not come easily. She looked up at the statue, at the man she had once dismissed, and felt tears prick her eyes. Slowly she stepped forward. Her voice trembled as she spoke. I was a fool, she began quietly. When my daughter told me she loved a human, I thought it was weakness. When he stood before me, I saw nothing but a fragile creature. But I was wrong. I was blind, she paused, her voice breaking. That human had more strength in his heart than I had in my entire empire. He taught my daughter love, and through her he taught us all peace. I see now. He was not the weak one. I was. A silence fell across the garden. The queen took a deep breath and continued. Elias Carter, I did not honor you in life. So today, I honor you in death. From this day forward, your name will be written in our royal halls as the protector of two worlds. Her voice echoed softly through the air. Lyra's eyes filled with tears as she stepped forward and hugged her mother, something she hadn't done since childhood. The queen held her tightly, trembling. I'm sorry, Sarathis whispered. For everything. For not believing in you. In him. Lyra smiled through her tears. He forgave you long ago, Mother. You just didn't know it. The Queen looked up at the stars again, and for the first time she didn't see them as cold or distant. She imagined Elias somewhere among them, watching with that same calm smile. As the lights of the memorial shimmered and the people bowed their heads, the Queen placed her crown at the statue's feet. It glowed faintly, a symbol of her surrender, not to weakness but to truth. May you rest among the stars, human, she whispered. You changed us all. And as the night sky stretched over Varen, Queen Sarathis finally felt peace, not as a ruler, but as a mother who had learned, at last, the meaning of love.